Hey there, welcome back to my sewing room. I'm Lori and this is my happy place, my sewing room. Today I am thinking about what can I do fairly quickly to put together a quilt top so that I can get it up on the long arm. As some of you know, if you've seen some of my other videos, I recently bought a long arm and I'm anxious to get some practice on it. And I've done so far just one small project. I did a table runner that I'm going to give away as a Christmas gift. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at what I can do that would be fairly quick. I've been attending block of the month quilt classes at my local quilt store here in Central Texas. And so a lot of times when the class ends, if I don't have a particular person in mind as to who I'm going to make that quilt for, it ends up being hung up on a hanger in my quilt closet, in the closet in my sewing room, until I have a project in mind for it. And so I'm thinking that's got to be the easiest way that I can put something together. Now, the first quilt top that I did for this, and I haven't quilted it yet, I just, finished it. The quilt top, I mean, is the block of the month that I did for Missouri Star. They had a block of the month subscription thing a while back, and I did that. And so I only just put all of those blocks together, and I'll show a picture of that if I can. But I have several other sets that I also want to put together because I think it'll be fairly quick and it'll look pretty nice. So let me show you what I have to choose from. Okay, so I'm giving these quilt blocks another look, and like many people, I'm really bad about finishing that last block of the class, so I always attach it to the hanger, figuring I'll do it when I get ready to put the actual block together. So this is one of the options. As you can see, this was an ombre theme that they offered. What our quilt store does is they will offer you 2 or 3 choices of fabrics, fabric lines that you can choose for the blocks, and then the blocks will be the same, but then the fabric will be different. So this one was ombre, and this line that I chose was called Stonehenge. All right, and so there's that as an option for putting a quilt together quickly. So then that leaves me this one, which was, if I'm not mistaken, Cafe Facet fabric line. And I you can tell there I messed up and I had to substitute some of my own fabric because that's actually a batik. That's what you do. You do what you have to do. So I sort of, when I did these, when I chose this fabric, I sort of had in mind the idea that I would make a quilt for my sister, because these to me look like her kind of colors. So that's another option. I could put those together. Now I also have this one. This is the most recent quilt class that we just finished with in my local quilt store, and these are 9-inch blocks, and it's the fabric line by Aditya Sitar, and it just so happens that I have a jelly roll of this exact line, but I want to do something a little bit more ambitious with this. So this, in my mind, is not really a candidate for a quick quilt that I can put together, without a whole lot of like thinking. So that leaves me this set, and this one does have the full 12. I don't remember when we did this, some years ago, and it's all pastels, but you can tell that it's not a solid, not quite a solid. It's kind of a, I don't remember the fabric line, but it's kind of got some variations in color like you would see in a grunge, but they're all pastel colors. And that made me think of a friend of mine who used to live here in Texas and then moved back out to the Pacific Northeast to be closer to family, because that's where she was from originally. And some years ago, I made a quilt for her daughter using the quilt blocks from the very first quilt class I ever took. And the fabric line for that one was Aunt Gracie, you know, that 30s style fabric. And I supplemented, I wanted to make it a twin size, so I supplemented the 12 blocks with some applique blocks that I had done at the time in order to make it larger, and then I just added borders in order to increase the size to get it to a twin size. So I'm thinking this is the one I'm going to go with. I think I'm going to make this quilt for my friend's other daughter, who was born later and who has not yet had a quilt from me. And so since I made one for her older sister, it seems only fair that I make one for her. So that's the plan. I think this would appeal to a little girl. She's about 4 now, so she's she's bigger than a toddler now, but I think these colors would still appeal to a little girl. And I like the fact that the blocks are very simple, because that to me calls out for some creative quilting. All right, that'll give me a chance to really practice some different things for my quilting. So what I found in my stash, I found a few charm squares that are in the same color range. And I found this fat quarter, which to me looks almost like an identical match to this. And then I have this white that is, I think, a grunge white. It's not like a true white. So I have those as options that I can use to make my extra block. And I think the pattern I'm going to copy is, here it is. This is the one I want. So I think I'm going to copy this block and just use different colors. Maybe another yellow in the center and the purple out in the corners, because I think I only need 2 of these to make this. So that'll make my 13th block, which will allow me to put the blocks on point. So then the next thing is I went to my quilt shop and got some fabric to do like the sashing and those triangles that you put around the perimeter. Once you've put blocks on point, you have to put in some half square triangles in order to straighten out the edges. So this is what I found, and I really like the low volume quality of these. And I also like the fact that they're not traditional pastel shades, because I don't want the quilt to be too bubblegum sweet kind of thing. I want to kind of temper it a little bit, and I really initially thought that this gray would make for some really nice sashing in between. And then the white for an outer border, you know, a thin, not an outer border, an inner border, actually, the first one that goes around the quilt, and then maybe this for an outer border. So that's the plan. And I just sort of guessed at the yardage since I'm not really following a pattern on this. So if I have to run back to the quilt store, I can do that. I also already ordered some fabric online to use for the back that I thought would be, you know, really pretty with it. So that's the next step, is I'm going to start seeing if I can put these together. So this is the progress that I've made. I got all of the blocks sashed and put together. What I did was I just added the sashing and got them together, and then figured out the size I needed for these triangles to straighten out the sides. The block that I made with my own scraps is this one here, and you can see I've been drawing on it, trying to decide how I'm going to quilt it. But before I get to that point, I still have to put an inner border and then an outer border. I'm going to put the white, this white that I used here, I'm going to make a narrow border around here. And then I'm going to need to put a large outer border, which means I'll have to go back to the quilt store to get more fabric. And then I'll use the border to try to figure out how to get it to a queen size, or not queen size, twin size. So I'm going to measure it and see where I am in that, and then I'll figure out the borders. Okay, so I'm getting ready to put the borders on my quilt, and the way you're supposed to do that, rather than just attaching the strips of fabric and then just sewing it however it fits, you're supposed to take 3 different measurements, average them together, and so that's what I did. So the distance for mine here averaged out to 65 3/4, and this way it averaged out to 66 1/2. So it's almost square, but not quite. And of course, I'm trying to get it to twin size. And a standard twin, from what I could see, is 63 by 87. So I'm already over that this way, which is okay, because that's allowing, the standard allows for a 12-inch drop, and so it'll be a little bit more than that. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add my narrow white border on the inside, right? And then my outer border, and that the inner border will be the same all the way around, right? But then my outer border is where I'm going to change it in order to get the length that I need. So I have that cut, and I have my inner border here, and then I have my side border, and then I have my whiter border. So those, I'm going to cut them, I'm going to sew them together, cut them to length, and then fit them on, and then I'll be about ready to start get it up on the long arm, because my backing fabric arrived today. So yay, I can actually finally get started on some quilting. So that's, I got to get the borders on and then the quilting. So the quilt is finished. This is the end result. Let's see if I can show a close-up of the quilting. It's been quilted. I put the binding on, and I've also washed it, which is why it has that crinkly factor now on it. The quilting is by no means perfect, but I would say it is definitely acceptable. I did my swirly meander, I did a leaf motif. I tried to do a kind of a scallop along this wide border, and then just lines. Because I initially thought I would do all kinds of like fancy things in all these big spaces, and I quickly realized that I didn't have yet the skill for that, and it would have taken me forever and probably not ended up as nice as I would want it to. So I decided to do a more of an all over design. So I'm actually pretty happy with the result. And golly, this was much faster than quilting on my sit-down machine, which I have done for some years now. And I will say that I've learned a few things that I will take with me as I work on the next quilt top, which is here waiting. It's that All Stars quilt top that I did with Missouri Star when they did their subscription block of the month thing. So that's going to be my next project, but this one is set up and ready to go, and I'm going to get that into the mail pretty soon. Before I end this, though, I do want to kind of run through some of the things that I feel like I learned through this first quilt that I just did on my long arm.